You think you understand women. You think you're prepared to love them, protect them, maybe even save them. But what if I told you that what you call love, is in fact, an unresolved need dressed as devotion? And if what attracts you is not the woman, but the shadow it awakens within you? This video will not teach you how to win over anyone. He will show you why you keep losing yourself every time you love. In the end, I will reveal the hidden pattern that silently destroys the souls of good men, and why the woman you idealize could be your symbolic ruin. But first, you need to face the mirror. You're not in a relationship with a woman, you're in a relationship with whatever she is. This happens more than you might think. Most men don't love the woman in front of them. They love the idea they have silently built in their head. An idea shaped by lack, desire for acceptance and fear of rejection. This is called projection. And every projection is a comfortable lodge. In childhood, the image of the perfect woman begins to form as a reflection of the idealized maternal figure. Then comes culture, pornography, romance films, Disney. And all of this plants a symbolic lie in the unconscious: is there someone who will complete me? When this myth is not questioned, the man becomes a slave to a desperate search, not for a woman, but for a piece of himself that he has lost. And then the danger arises: instead of seeing the woman as she is, the man begins to distort her every attitude to fit the narrative he created. If she is cold, he says she is shy. If she is manipulative, he says she is intense. It romanticizes what should be seen as a warning. The archetype of the perfect woman blinds him, weakens him, and infantilizes him. But here's the truth no one tells you: the more idealized a woman is in your mind, the more distant you are from reality, and the more vulnerable you are to frustration, anger, and emotional breakdown. Because every ill-nourished fantasy turns into disappointment. And the bigger the image, the more painful the fall will be. There is a psychic phenomenon called possessive anima. Jung said that when a man is dominated by his unconscious anima, he becomes weak, dependent and blind to reality. He doesn't love a woman of flesh and blood. He loves an imaginary goddess. And every goddess, sooner or later, demands sacrifice. The question no one asks is, what are you trying to fix about yourself by looking for that ideal woman? Because, often, it doesn't represent love, it represents escape. Escape from internal pain. Escape from loneliness. Escape from your own shadow. That's why when this woman leaves, the breakdown is so devastating. Have you ever noticed how men who say they are too romantic are actually emotionally codependent? It's not love, it's emotional addiction. It's not affection, it's unconscious projection. They don't love a woman. They need someone to not get in touch with their own emptiness. And when this image is broken, when the woman does not live up to the myth, the man goes into denial, anger or obsession. He alternates between blaming her or himself. But he never realizes that the mistake was before the meeting. The error was in the illusion he created. And the illusion was born from unresolved lack. The woman is not your cure. It is not your destiny. It is not your salvation. She is a complex, ambiguous, changing human being, just like you. And until you abandon the myth of perfection, you will continue to be disappointed by reality. Because reality will never obey your fantasy. And here's the most symbolic thing of all: the feminine ideal you project is actually a part of you that you've rejected. The sweetness, the intuition, the vulnerability, the soul. When you integrate these parts into yourself, you stop projecting them onto others. And only then, finally, does he begin to see the real woman. The dual nature, shadow and light in the feminine archetype. The woman as a symbol of the unconscious, when she guides, and when she destroys. The woman has always been a symbol of the unconscious. Carl Jung understood the feminine as a portal, a threshold between the known and the unknown. And therefore, every woman in a man's life is, in a way, a mirror of his own unconscious, reflecting both the light and the darkness that he carries, even without realizing it. At first, this energy may seem magical. Sensitivity, intuition, delivery. All of this enchants, fascinates, hypnotizes. But what begins as symbolic seduction can, over time, reveal its opposite side. Because where there is intense light, there is also deep shadow. And the more we deny it, the more it imposes itself in a destructive way. Many men live in relationships where the woman sometimes seems to be a muse, sometimes an executioner. But they don't realize that this oscillation isn't just in them. It's inside them. The woman is simply revealing the pendulum movement that exists in the unintegrated male unconscious, between desire and fear, dependence and anger, love and obsession. When a man does not recognize his own shadow, he projects it onto a woman. He says she is crazy, difficult, unstable. But in reality, he is describing parts of himself that he's never had the courage to look at. The chaos she seems to represent is the same chaos he has repressed since childhood. And the most dangerous thing, by trying to control the woman to protect himself from pain, the man destroys his own symbolic link with the feminine. He tries to prune her soul to avoid confronting his own inner disorder. But every attempt to tame the unconscious creates even bigger monsters. Have you ever noticed how some men are afraid of very intelligent, free or intuitive women? It's not about the woman herself. It's about how much it activates something that he hasn't yet been able to integrate within himself. And for this reason, he prefers to relate to reduced versions, easier to predict, master and forget. But there is a hidden paradox here. It is precisely this wild, mysterious, ambiguous feminine that can lead a man to his true self. It is through women that many begin the journey of individuation. But this only happens when she is seen as a mirror, not as an enemy, nor as a savior. The woman, in the symbolic imagination, has always represented the crossing. Eve, Pandora, Lilith, Maria. Each represents an aspect of the feminine unconscious that you can guide or lose. The difference lies in the level of consciousness of man. Those who only see the surface get lost. Whoever sees the symbol awakens. In the end, the question is not whether women are light or shadow. The question is, which part of you is it activating now? Because the true feminine never comes to comfort the ego. He comes to destabilize, to expose, to transform. And only those who are ready to die inside can cross. Why many men love the image, and not the woman? The hard truth about attachment to the reflection of lack and not to the essence of the other. Have you ever wondered why so many relationships feel intense at the beginning and devastating at the end? The answer can be brutal. Many men don't fall in love with who a woman is, but with the image she projects into the void that exists within them. And that image never lasts. Deep down, what we call love is often just an emotional mirror. Man sees in her what he most wants to feel about himself, to be needed, to be special, to be loved unconditionally. But that's not love. This is a desire for compensation. And compensations do not support real bonds. It's like a silent addiction. He doesn't want to know who she really is. He wants her to make him feel less lost, less alone, less worthless. Her image becomes an emotional drug, and like all drugs, it needs to be constantly renewed to maintain its effect. The problem is that no real woman can maintain this role for long. She gets tired. She changes. She fails. And it is at this moment that the collapse begins. The man feels that he has been betrayed. But it wasn't her who betrayed him, it was her image that crumbled. And with it, the character he created collapsed. When Jung spoke of projection, he warned about this phenomenon. We do not see people as they are, but as we are. And while this is not integrated, love becomes a prison. Because the man begins to demand from the woman that she keeps the fantasy he created alive, without her being aware of it. Do you realize how dangerous this is? A man in love with an image demands emotional constancy from someone who doesn't even know what he is representing. And when she fails to live up to the myth, he accuses her, punishes her, or discards her. Not out of malice, but out of symbolic desperation. And here's the cruelest irony, the more he clings to the image, the more he distances himself from the real woman. He doesn't listen to what she says. He interprets. He doesn't observe who she is. He labels. He doesn't love. He projects. And when the projection breaks, he says she has changed. But what changed was the fantasy. Therefore, many men jump from relationship to relationship, trying to find that initial feeling again. But what they want is not a new woman. It's a new illusion. They are in love with how felt. And they don't realize that the origin of this wasn't in her. It was in them. True love begins when the image dies. When the veil falls. When a woman stops being a muse and becomes a human being. Only then can man finally see, not what he wants see, but what really is there. And that, for many, is unbearable. But for those who endure, this is the beginning of something rare, the end of need and the birth of a real bond. Because only when you stop loving the image, do you become capable of loving the truth. The invisible manipulation of sweetness. How apparent fragility can hide subtle and unconscious power plays. Not all sweetness is purity. Not all fragility is innocence. There is a form of power that is silent, subtle, almost imperceptible, but profoundly effective. It is power exercised through apparent vulnerability, calculated tenderness, performed fragility. And many men, without knowing it, fall exactly there. From an early age, we are conditioned to protect the fragile feminine. Don't make her cry, she's sensitive, be a gentleman. But this programming creates a blind spot. Man becomes vulnerable precisely where he believes he is strong. When trying to protect, he gives himself away. And when you surrender, you lose your discernment. The manipulation of sweetness is not necessarily conscious. Many women resort to it unconsciously, as an inherited archetypal strategy. They realize that softness can bend wills, that lack can generate action, that pain can become a silent command. And they use it, even without rational intention. How many times have you given in because you didn't want to hurt? How many times have you done something you didn't want to do, just to not seem insensitive? The manipulation of sweetness operates there, not with force, but with delicacy. Not with screams, but with silences loaded with symbolic guilt. The problem is that, when this game takes hold, man begins to act to avoid tears, not to seek truth. He starts to dance around her emotions like someone avoiding triggering a bomb. And he loses his voice. Lose your identity. It loses its strength. And the most tragic thing, he believes he is in love. But it isn't. He is obeying. And it confuses emotional submission with care. But care that requires self-effacement is servitude. And servitude disguised as love is what silently destroys the male soul. In many relationships, the most commonly said phrase in a man's mind is, "If I say that, she will get hurt." And this internal censorship grows, until he no longer says anything. It becomes an emotional satellite, revolving around the partner's emotional needs. And the more he disappears, the more she demands presence. Can you see the trap? He empties himself trying to please. And the more he pleases, the more he becomes irrelevant. Because manipulative sweetness does not respect the weak. It consumes him. She demands of him what he doesn't know how to deny. And in the end, she despises him for giving in so much. But there is a way out. The man who sees this pattern and names it, not in anger, but in awareness, begins to regain his center. He understands that not every tear is injustice. That not all silence is purity. That sometimes, sweetness can be shadow's most effective disguise. And that's when he returns to love, not as a servant, but as a conscious presence. He starts to offer truth instead of comfort. And this change, although painful at first, marks the end of subtle manipulation. And the beginning of a real relationship. The inner mother and the desire to be saved. The male mother complex and how it distorts the way men relate to women. Every man carries, in the depths of the unconscious, an image of the mother. Not the literal mother, but the symbolic mother, source of security, emotional nutrition, unconditional acceptance. The problem is that when this archetype is not recognized and integrated, it infiltrates all romantic relationships. And it turns women into saviors. This is why so many men unconsciously seek women who complete them, who heal their pain, who make them feel alive. They're not looking for a partner, they're looking for a lap. And when they find that lap, they don't love the woman. They become addicted to her. The mother complex is cunning. It creates an emotional dependence disguised as romanticism. The man begins to act like a well-behaved boy waiting for approval. He hides his anger, swallows his limits, accepts what he disagrees with, also as not to lose the affection that reminds him of his idealized mother. But here's the uncomfortable truth: no woman came to be your mother. And the more you demand this role from her, the more she loses desire, respect and admiration for you. Because the woman who loves a man doesn't want to be his emotional babysitter. She wants to be seen, not worshipped. Touched, not adored. And what happens when women fail in the symbolic role? When does she show herself to be human, selfish, fragile? The collapse. The inner boy despairs. The disappointment is disproportionate. The man says he was betrayed, that she wasn't what he thought. But she wasn't the problem, it was the maternal fantasy that had collapsed. How many men, when feeling rejected, do not engage in childish behavior? They beg, threaten, disappear to attract attention. It's not him who's acting out, it's the hurt boy who never learned how to deal with no from an affectionate figure. He's not living in a relationship, he's reliving his childhood. This projection of the mother is one of the biggest saboteurs of the masculine. Because it prevents man from seeing himself as responsible for his own healing. He delegates this to his partner. And in doing so, he becomes weak, resentful, demanding. Because she expects something from her that she doesn't even know she's offering. And there is something even deeper here. This desire to be saved is, at heart, the desire to avoid the pain of growing up. Growing up hurts. It means cutting the symbolic umbilical cord. It means stopping asking for a lap. And starting to support your own emotional ground. But as long as the man runs away from this, he will continue to create relationships where he is always the needy son of a woman who never asked to be a mother. Liberation begins when he realizes this. When you stop demanding and start integrating. When you understand that what you are looking for outside needs to be found inside. And only then, the woman stops being a symbol of salvation to become a companion on the journey. When the feminine rejects the fragile masculine. Why women test boundaries, and what it reveals about strength, respect, and emotional truth. There is a silent truth that few men have the courage to face: the feminine does not respect the fragile masculine. It doesn't matter how kind, present or affectionate he is. If he doesn't have a center, if he doesn't impose limits, if he doesn't support his truth, she will reject him, emotionally, physically or symbolically. But that's not evil. It's symbolic biology. It's archetypal psychology. It's a test. Every woman, conscious or not, tests. Test to see if the man is real or a facade. Test to see if he says yes because he wants to, or because he's afraid of displeasing. Test to see if he is a presence, or just a lack in the form of a man. These tests do not come with a warning. They are subtle. Sometimes they come in the form of irony, small provocations, illogical demands. It's not drama. It's instinct. The feminine tests because it needs to trust. And she only trusts the man who can maintain her axis, even when she is in chaos. Have you ever experienced this? You gave in, retreated, adapted, and still she moved away? It's because she didn't want someone who molded herself to everything. She wanted someone who had shape. That it had structure. Who knew how to say no without fear. That he had the courage to displease so as not to betray himself. The fragile masculine bends to please. But, paradoxically, this does not generate love, it generates contempt. Because on an unconscious level, the woman feels that she is stronger than him. And this triggers a deep conflict in her. She wants to surrender, but finds nothing to support her fall. And here comes the modern drama, men trying to be good believing that this is enough. But to be good without being strong is to be harmless. And the harmless does not arouse trust. It arouses pity. And pity kills desire. Kills the bond. Kills the relationship. Jung would say that this is the man who has not yet integrated his inner warrior. He's just a good boy, domesticated, submissive, eager for approval. But the feminine is not looking for a boy. Look for a man who knows his shadow, and yet remains centered. When a woman rejects the fragile masculine, she is not rejecting affection, she is rejecting the absence of strength. The absence of clarity. The absence of presence. Because where there is no presence, everything dissolves. And a woman cannot give herself over to what dissolves. Awakening begins when man understands that being firm is not being aggressive. It's about being honest. It's supporting your own truth, even when it bothers you. It's looking into her eyes and saying, I love you. But I won't lose myself to please you. And only then. Respect is born. The power of misunderstood feminine vulnerability. How pain and fragility can become instruments of emotional control. There is something deeply hypnotic about female vulnerability. It touches primitive places in the male unconscious, it activates the protective instinct, the desire to welcome, to heal. But when that vulnerability is misinterpreted, it becomes an emotional trap. The man sees the tear as truth. Sees silence as suffering. See the crisis as a sign of fragility. And, by blindly believing in this, he automatically positions himself as a savior. The problem is that not all pain needs salvation. And not all fragility is that fragile. Often, this vulnerability is an unconscious mode of control. It's not that the woman is faking it. It's just that she learned, from an early age, that her emotions have power. That when it breaks, the world bends. That when she suffers, others rush to correct her. And that becomes a language. A code. An instrument. The man, when interpreting everything as a cry for help, does not realize the symbolic game that is taking place. He begins to mold himself to her emotional reactions. And without noticing, he enters a cycle. The more unstable he is, the more he adapts. And the more he adapts, the more she tests the limits of how much she can influence him. Do you see how this reverses the roles? The man loses his axis. The woman becomes the center. And not because it was talked about, but because it was sense. In the emotional field, those who set the tone are those who destabilize the other. And in this game, the most sensitive is not always the weakest. This is why many men say I can't understand what she wants. It's not that it's indecipherable. It's just that he's trying to decipher the behavior, without understanding the dynamics symbolic. And the dynamic is simple, as long as she feels like she can guide you through the emotion, she'll do it. The vulnerability that manipulates doesn't scream, it whispers. She hides behind sweet words, dramatic pauses, silent tears. And behind this, there is an invisible message: do as I want, or I will be hurt. And it will be your fault. The man who does not realize this becomes an emotional servant. Acts out of fear of causing pain. And little by little, he stops saying what he thinks. Stop showing who you are. Stop existing as an individual. And that is the price of a naive reading of vulnerability. But there is a way out. The conscience. The man who sees this pattern begins to respond with presence, not guilt. He validates the pain. Without giving in to the implicit command. He welcomes. Without abandoning his truth. And this, paradoxically, frees them both from the symbolic prison that imprisoned them. Because, in the end, true vulnerability only turns into love. When it finds firmness. And true firmness only becomes trustworthy when you don't fear the pain of others. The shadow of the woman, silent, magnetic, and dangerous. The archetype of the dark woman, Lilith, the seductress who does not submit, and the ancient fear she awakens. Every woman carries a shadow. It's not a defect, it's a psychic structure. Jung said that where there is light, there is shadow. And in the feminine, this shadow can take on seductive, mysterious and dangerous forms. This is not about evil, but about unconscious power that is misunderstood. The mythological figure of Lilith represents exactly this. Unlike Eve, Lilith does not obey. Don't bow. It does not adapt to male desire. She is desire in itself. She is wild. And that is why, throughout history, it has been demonized. The man fears the woman he cannot control. And this fear is not rational. It's ancestral. It's in the collective unconscious. The woman who doesn't need him, who doesn't flatter him, who doesn't admire him, who confronts him, activates his most primitive insecurity, the fear of being exposed as weak in the face of a force he doesn't understand. Have you ever met a woman who seemed to read you with her eyes? That I didn't need to scream to destabilize you? This is the power of the feminine shadow. She acts in silence, in small gestures, in looks. It activates what's unresolved in you, without having to say a word. And when man is not aware of his own shadow, he becomes easy prey. He confuses intensity with love. Mix attraction with connection. And he surrenders to a game he doesn't understand, where every emotion is a trap, and every surrender can be used against him. The dark woman doesn't want the good man. She despises the weak. She feeds on the chaos he tries to hide. And the more he tries to please, the more she feels like she's won. But this victory does not nourish her. Just push her away. Because deep down, she also wants to be defeated, not with force, but with real presence. But be careful, the female shadow is not a villain. She is a master. It reveals to man his weaknesses, his emptiness, his fears. It forces you to grow or destroys you. Not because he wants to, but because he is. It is symbolic in nature. It's psychological alchemy. The man who understands this does not run away from the dark woman. He stares at her. He respects her. He doesn't try to tame her, but he doesn't surrender to her either. He maintains his center. And so, she tests him. And chooses him. Because the shadow only respects what it cannot dominate. And it is in this encounter, between the woman who does not submit and the man who does not bend, that something rare is born. A true bond. Because both stopped being symbols. To become whole. The feminine is a portal to chaos. When the woman is not a partner in growth, but a catalyst for the weak man's inner collapse. Not every encounter with the feminine brings healing. Some encounters reveal the abyss. This happens when man, still fragmented, seeks in others a structure that he himself did not build. And when that woman comes into your life, she doesn't complete you. She disintegrates him. This is because the deep feminine, the true, symbolic, does not come to please. Come to show. Show where you are still insecure, dependent, unbalanced. The woman, in this case, is not a partner. She is a mirror. And a mirror, when reflected into a fragile ego, can become unbearable. How many men, when relating to emotionally intense women, begin to experience an existential crisis? They lose focus, direction, identity. But they don't realize that this isn't her fault. It is the unconscious's response to the revelation of a still unstructured self. This woman activates hidden archetypes. Sometimes she seems like a muse. Other times, a witch. Sometimes it's sweet. Sometimes it's cruel. And the man tries to decipher it. But all he finds is confusion. Because in reality, what she's exposing is chaos within his, not outside. It's as if she pulls him into the symbolic underworld. For the unconscious. To the place where there is no control. Where instincts speak louder. Where the ego does not command. And he, unprepared, Feels like he's going crazy. But it's not crazy. It is a collapse of the false self. The chaotic feminine doesn't want a man who tries to fix her. She wants a man who will support her while she collapses. But the weak masculine, instead of standing firm, tries to save. And in doing so, you lose yourself. Because he doesn't have the structure to withstand the storm, so he drowns in it. This does not mean that the woman is destructive. It means she has the power to reveal what is rotten. Which is unresolved. What was hidden. And if man still lives in the illusion of control, this revelation completely destroys him. The Kali archetype, in Hindu mythology, represents this energy, the goddess of destruction, transformation, necessary chaos. It destroys the ego so that the self can emerge. But only the initiated can face its face without running away. The rest. Call her crazy and run. And here's the secret, female chaos is not the end. It's the ticket. The man who crosses it, without fleeing, without attacking, without dissolving, comes out on the other side reborn. He is no longer a boy. He is no longer a slave. He's a man. Because only those who have experienced disorder can sustain true order. The great truth men refuse to see. Relationship is not a place of comfort, it is a brutal mirror of one's own evolution or stagnation. Most men still believe that relationships are a prize, an arrival point, a relief from loneliness, a validation of worth, a safe place where you can finally rest. But here is the great truth that few have the courage to face: relationships are not refuges. It's a symbolic battlefield. Because that's where everything you repressed comes back. All insecurity, all neediness, all need for control, all fear of abandonment. And the woman, unintentionally, unknowingly, activates each of these wounds as if she were following an invisible script written in her unconscious. She's not the one who hurts you. It's you who bleeds where it hasn't healed yet. And that's why love, when it's real, doesn't come to comfort you. Come to reveal yourself. And this revelation hurts. It hurts because it shows how much you still depend on it. How much you still pretend. How much do you still expect the other person to resolve what is yours? The man who seeks peace in a relationship is, in fact, wanting to escape his internal work. But the woman, by symbolic nature, does not allow escape. She watches. Sit down. It provokes. She touches exactly where it hurts most, not out of cruelty, but out of archetypal instinct. And the man who doesn't understand this calls it a problem. How many have said, "She drives me crazy, she destabilizes me, she makes me doubt myself." But maybe what it does is show you how much you never been serious, how much you always been unstable, how much did you always he doubted himself, and is only now seeing it. The relationship is not a stage for romanticism. It is a mirror of individuation. It shows who you have become. And who you haven't yet had the courage to be. And as long as you treat women as a problem, you will continue to run away from the only truth that matters. You created this dynamic with the very shadows you refuse to look at. Do you want to know why so many relationships fail? Because they both want to be understood, but neither wants to transform. They want to be loved, but they don't know themselves. They want reciprocity, but they still operate from childhood wounds. The woman, in this context, is the constant reminder that you are not yet finished building yourself. And that requires humility, courage, and a bitter dose of deconstruction. Because love, when it is true, requires you to die a little, to be born different next to the other. And here is the final truth: until you understand that the relationship is a mirror of your evolution, you will continue to attract dynamics that hurt you, not because life is cruel, but because your soul wants to wake up. You don't need to understand all women. But you urgently need to understand what they activate in you. Because at the end of the day, it's not about them. It's about the projections, the wounds, the voids. It's about how much you still give your soul to be accepted. And if the relationship keeps destroying you, maybe it's not broken, but working exactly as it should. As a mirror of what you have not yet integrated. The woman who rejects you, who manipulates you, who tests you. It is often the living metaphor of your unconsciousness. Do you want to truly love? So start by letting the man you love die so you won't be alone. Now tell me, which of these truths did you see most of yourself today? Leave it in the comments. If this touched on something you couldn't name. Subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning. In the next videos, we will continue to explain what you feel, but still don't know how to explain.